Hi there, it's Sergio with the RideShare Guy. Welcome to another episode of Behind the Wheel. Today I'm joined by Loren from Minneapolis. As we all know and read in the news, a lot of stuff is going on when it comes to Uber and Lyft in Minneapolis these days. And, we present all opinions as far as drivers are concerned. Not all is bad in the gig world or the rideshare world, and not all is good. But, we call it the way we see it. And here's a gentleman that calls it the way he sees it. And Loren, welcome.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, yeah. You live in Minneapolis. How long you've been a rideshare driver for, and how many trips you have under your belt? You full-time, part-time? Give us some info. Introduce yourself.
Yep, actually, we all say Minneapolis to St. Paul. I'm actually in a suburb of St. Paul called Apple Valley. I'm about 15 minutes south of the Mall of America. I lived in China for 12 years. I came back in 2016 for family reasons, needed something to do. And wow, Ubering, that's a perfect job to do. And I was here for 3 months and I really liked it. And when COVID killed off my business, no visa. So I had to move back. I moved back to my hometown, got an apartment in Apple Valley in the end of June of 2020 and looked at different job availabilities. I didn't like what I saw. And I'm like, I'll go back to Uber Lyft. So I rented a car originally for a couple months through Avis. I started driving in August. Spent 2 months trying to find the perfect vehicle to use for Uber and Lyft. Bought a Jeep Patriot in November and started working full time. And actually, when I saw what was going on with the city council and what might be happening, I kind of started a second gig as process serving. And I'm actually doing so much the last 2 months. Unfortunately, as much as I love Ubering, I haven't had as much time. The last day I did the big St. Patrick's Saturday night, I did 9 hours. Other than that, I haven't had a chance to do much more than 5 or 6 hours a week
Okay.
over the last months.
You were full-time before until this processing work took off, I guess. And are you planning on coming back to doing rideshare? I mean, obviously you may not know, but what do you think about that?
Obviously, I think something's going to happen. I honestly think the state legislature is going to get involved and they're going to do Minneapolis Mayor Fry's proposal of like $1.21 a mile, 50. I think it was like 38 cents a minute, which means I'd love to be able to go back and do ride sharing again. But I've just got to prepare myself right now that if Minneapolis gets taken out, there won't be as much available. But no, the thing about process serving is you're all alone doing it, and you're not exactly being able to have nice conversations with people when you do it. I love Uber driving and Lyft driving because I love driving. I love being able to have the conversations and meeting people.
Okay. Now, since you haven't been doing it obviously for a couple of months and you're doing something else, um, is it your opinion that drivers should not get paid more? Do you think the pay is fair as far as you're concerned? And
No, we don't. Oh, sorry.
no, hold on one second. I'm not. This is not going to be a debate. I don't want to debate you. All I'm telling you is
Oh,
that
no,
I need to find out why you're opposed to drivers getting paid more. That's all I'm trying to find out.
No, I'm not opposed to getting paid more. As you know, when the upfront pricing came, we took a cut. Uber and Lyft said, oh, you're going to make a little less on the long runs and more on the short runs. We were making pennies more on the short runs. And a 20-minute ride, a 15-minute ride, a 30-minute, an hour-minute ride, they were cutting 25% off of what we were making. And no, I was not happy with that at all. And I knew we were getting, to be honest, we were getting screwed. And I think we do deserve that money back and a little more. It's just what the city of Minneapolis was proposing is ridiculously high and is actually going to hurt supply and demand. And now, of course, if they pull out, there'll be nothing.
Yeah, that part I agree with you. Have you read the report that was sponsored by the governor's commission? The 70
Yep,
pages of it?
I read the basics where it said what what would be a fair pay to get the minimum wage, but the expense reports were completely wrong. They tried to factor in people's car insurance. First of all, if you own a car, you have to have insurance. Progressive, I have Progressive. I pay for a rideshare rider. Okay, to be able to have the rider, I pay $40 a month. It started at $15 a month 3.5 years ago. With this crazy inflation and in the Twin Cities with the carjackings and the car thefts, it's made our insurance go way up. But I'm still only paying $40 a month. If I stopped doing rideshare, my insurance would only go down $40 a month. So, and a cell phone, they factored in the cost of a mobile phone. We all have to have a mobile phone in this day and age. Now, right. I write off half of my mobile phone expense on my taxes.
Right. So the thing that was glaring at that report to me was that 89 cents a mile and 49 cents a minute would equal minimum wage in Minneapolis. I mean, that's what the report said, right? And the city council passed an ordinance that calls for $1.40 as opposed to 89 cents, and then 51 cents a minute as opposed to 49. So the minute part is pretty much the same, but the mileage obviously is high. So your opinion is that there's price elasticity, obviously. If the rider is going to get charged $1.40, and well, this is what the driver is going to get paid, we'll have to factor in now the take rate, right? When, as we all know, Uber and Lyft are taking anywhere between 30 and 50%. So if you add that, the rider is going to get charged instead of $1.40, probably $2.80 or $2.50 a mile, right? And another 70, 80 cents a minute. So you're saying that that's going to kill demand? Is that why you're going with this?
Right. I had a lot of passengers. I drove on the St. Patrick's Saturday night eve. I drove 9 hours, and almost every passenger obviously was asking me about this. And I talked to them, and a lot of them said, yeah, I'm paying $20 for this ride. Okay. And I said, well, it's going to cost you possibly $38, maybe even $40. They said that I would never take this ride. I'd find another way. Me personally, when I talked to the city council a year ago, I said, okay, I was at a concert next to Target Field. And I said, I missed and I was parked in a place in the city, which was 4.5 miles away, and I missed the light rail. So I was thinking maybe I walk 3 blocks and take the bus. And I looked and go, oh, it's $10.84 Uber, 11 o'clock at night. I'm just going to take the Uber to where my car's parked. If that ride is $18 or $20, I'm walking 3 blocks and taking the bus. There's no way I'm paying $18 to go 4.5 miles for 15 minutes if I'm a passenger.
Right. I was like, in all of this, obviously, I'm in touch with Malda. I'm in touch with the city council. I'm in touch with new companies that want to get into the space, right? And with different systems. Do you think rideshare, doing rideshare as a driver for minimum wage, because that's what the proposal is, right? We get the minimum wage, but then they offered $1.40 a mile and 51 cents a minute. That's going to put it above minimum wage. Do you think rideshare drivers should get paid only minimum wage, or should we weigh in the risks of doing rideshare, as you said, the carjackings and the crime against rideshare drivers? I mean, not a day goes by that we hear somebody got carjacked, somebody got shot, but that's, I guess, part of society. Crime is going to find you anywhere. However, do you think rideshare is a minimum wage job?
It's above minimum wage. The narrative has changed. Last year, I contacted different media trying to tell them how much my wages are. I had a whole packet made out of my wages, and I gave it to Councilman Rainville to show the other councilmen and to show the Mayor Fry, because they said, oh, they're hearing our drivers are claiming they can't make minimum wage. And I said, well, I am. And I actually took on the council, 5 members of the council. There was a meeting last year when they first were doing the proposal. It was for riders, and no riders showed up at the council meeting, just me. So after I was talking with them, I looked at them and I asked them, I said, how do you know these drivers are making such little money, $9 an hour? Well, they tell us. I said, okay, did you actually have any of them show your taxes, show you their screenshots? They go, well, we can't do that. I go, well, let me show you mine. And I showed them 1 week where I did $1,400 before expenses on, 50 hours. I said, how am I making this money and these drivers aren't? And Wansley looked at me and said, well, you're different. Then I looked at Ellison. I said, how am I doing this and the other drivers aren't? And he said, you're different. So I asked them all, I said, how am I different than all the other drivers? And they just stared me down and said nothing. And then it started to get a little into a contentious meeting, and it broke up after about 30 minutes.
Right. But as you said yourself, upfront fares has been a cut. Do you agree or disagree?
Well, this was after the cut. I was making more than this before the cut.
Okay.
But no, we're definitely making too little. I'm not denying that. What my point is, and the narrative has changed. The media is interviewing drivers like me who say what the city council is listening to is not true. If you can't, in the Twin Cities, I'm not going to talk about any other market, in the Twin Cities, if you work 40 hours and after all your expenses, you can't make $18 an hour minimum, then something's wrong with what you're doing with the job.
Okay.
Because usually after expenses, I usually make about 23 after gas.
Right. So, well, you said just gas, but do you consider other expenses like depreciation and maintenance and wear and tear, everything in your cost basis?
Right. After all expenses, on my worst day, I still usually make 18 an hour.
Okay.
And I usually make, after all expenses, I usually make $20 an hour minimum on my worst days.
Okay. And
I factor all that in.
And you're happy with that $20 that you're making per hour, I guess, right?
I'm not happy, but because again, I took a cut in pay from 2 years ago. I was making more 2 years ago. I'm not happy. I'd like to make more, but I don't want to make it to the point that I'm not making any money because the companies are left or there's just not as much demand.
Yeah, I mean, no, that one part I agree with you is that if they do leave, which I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I have ideas about it, but if they do leave, the drivers are going to get, half of zero, zero,
Yeah.
zero. You know what I'm saying? So like, to me, it's like as far as I'm concerned, I think cooler heads will prevail. I'll ask your guess about that as well. Maybe your crystal ball is better because you're on the ground there. My guess is that cooler heads are going to prevail and they're not going to leave. What do you think about that?
I think the state will work something out. Problem was I attended almost every TNC committee meeting that the government had. I missed just 2 of them. And there was a point where they almost had an agreement. Uber and Lyft said, we will put on the table that we will pay $35 an hour during actual drive time.
Right.
So let's say I do, a 1 hour drive. I'm going to make guaranteed $35 over that 1 hour. The Malta drivers turned it down because Uber Lyft insisted that they get put in the law that no city can override and have their own fare. And the union rep that was on the committee talked to the Malta drivers when all this was being talked and said, no, we won't agree to this. They actually had an agreement in place, but the Malta drivers and the union rep on the committee said no, because they wanted it to where cities could make their own rates.
Yeah.
And that kind of killed any hope of anything being agreed upon for rates in that in the TNC committee meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I've been living with Proposition 22 in California for the past 3.5 years, right? And whatever Uber and Lyft are going to propose is some version of a Prop 22, which is on active time only. Active time meaning you're on your way to the passenger and with a passenger in the car. So when they do say these kind of words, put them out there, and nobody really understands it, but I do, is that they said, well, when they said 35, okay, we'll pay you 35 on period 2 combined with period 3, or period 3 only with a butt in the back seat, right? Well, you have to look at the utilization rate. Now, you may be one of the drivers who has a very high utilization rate, meaning you accept every trip, and then out of the 60 minutes of the hour, you're pretty much taking every trip, and then maybe you're busy 50 minutes out of the 60. So in that case, the 35 will apply kind of to you. But if your utilization rate is 50% for one reason or another, maybe you're not taking on enough jobs, then that 35 loses its meaning. It's down to 17.5 before expenses. So that's the pushback that they have going back and forth. Are you a driver that accepts pretty much all, you just turn the app on and accept? Do you cherry pick? What style of driving do you deploy?
When I meet drivers and they tell me how they take every ride, I tell them they need to see the RideShare Guy to teach them how that's a mistake. I actually tell a lot of drivers who I meet to go to the RideShare Guy because they'll teach you how to do this job better. We may have our disagreements, but I always tell drivers they're going to learn the best how to do this job through your website.
Well, how do you do it? Tell us how you do it.
I don't cherry pick. I usually keep my acceptance rate is usually around 80 to 85%. Okay. I look at the rides like almost every week there'll be a Quest bonus. Either it's Lyft or Uber. So I'll pick short runs because I like to hit the Quest bonus right away so I don't have to worry about it. Once I get near the Quest bonus, then I'll look at, okay, how much is this ride paying and how much is it costing me to get there? Right. Plus, I look at also If it's the address, a lot of times I can tell if the address is a restaurant or a bar. Those tend to be better tips.
Yeah.
I'll look at stuff like that too.
So you do have a strategy, obviously, that you're doing short trips with Quest, but as you know, Quest and tips or ride challenges on Lyft, they're not a guarantee, right? Not everybody gets it. I mean, some people, I haven't had one in LA for over 4 months. So those are the variables of the industry that kind of fluctuates everybody's numbers up and down. Obviously, if like this weekend, I had a Quest, I did it, right? Because it makes sense to do garbage trips. I mean, that's it. That's the only way to do it. But let's get back to the Minneapolis situation. So my opinion is that something is going to happen and they're not going to leave. And I mean, I know more, but I'm not at liberty to discuss that. But what do you think? Do you think they're going to leave? Do you think they're bluffing?
I don't think they're bluffing because if they actually do what they say and they close what's it called now? The Uber
green light hubs.
Green light hub. If they close that tells you right there that I don't think they're bluffing. And like I said, I think the Twin Cities market, I get so tired of us being compared to New York City and Seattle by the MALTA drivers. New York City is one of the most expensive cities in the world. Seattle is still one of the most expensive cities in the country. People here are much more price sensitive. Not to mention a lot of rides on Lyft are done by it's being paid by the county. They're low income. Now, you're not going to get tips on these rides, but rides are still rides.
Yeah.
Those rides will be done because the counties aren't going to be paying the fares that's, for people to go in Minneapolis to what it's going to cost.
Yeah.
And again, we don't have the best network, but we still have light rail and we still have bus, and there are people who are going to use that. Unfortunately, I think it's going to create more people to start driving drunk. If they're like, I'm not going to pay $40 to go 8 miles home, I'll just risk driving.
Yeah, I mean, there are other companies that are looking into actually coming to Minneapolis, and their systems are not based on algorithms. It's based mostly on time and distance rates, right? And then, subscription-based systems and whatever not. But we'll see. Time will tell if they're going to actually take the leap and come in, because it's not an easy thing to do. To get a TNC license, it's expensive on their end. So you're making above the Minneapolis City Council's minimum wage ordinance, right? Already. You're not happy about these companies leaving because they're saying if they leave, I have no income left, right? But do you look at it this way that, I've spoken to Eid, obviously, maybe Eid Ali from Malta or not. Minneapolis is a really, really different place. When I read all the 70 pages of that report, which took me hours and hours to do, it's really different, actually, that in Minneapolis, 31% of drivers do 69% of the trips, right? So there are a lot of full-timers in there this is their livelihood. It's like with you, it's not. You said you haven't driven for the last 2 months. You're doing something else and it's paying your bills, right? You don't have to do it. But there are a lot of people who do depend on this as their livelihood, right? What do you say to that? I mean, should there be some sort of a hybrid system? Full-timers should get some benefits or higher pay than part-timers? What do you think about that?
I think, it shouldn't have your full or part-time. But one thing that happened at the TNC committee, the MALTA drivers never pushed for sick days. I don't get that. I couldn't say anything sitting there. And there's so many times I want to interject. After the meeting, I would talk to different members of the council and say, how come we're not talking sick days here? The drivers aren't bringing it up. I think it's imperative that drivers get sick days. And I'm really upset that Uber Lyft have to have it legislated for them to be forced to give us sick days. Like Seattle, I guess, is getting sick days.
Yeah.
I think it's important that everybody gets sick days. But I think in terms of the full and part-time, again, I'm part-time right now just because I'm doing so busy process serving. I don't know if the process serving is going to stay busy. Yeah. If it isn't, I'm going to have to go back to doing Uber Lyft full time again. But Minneapolis is just part of it. You can actually make money working the suburbs. Now, Lyft says they'll leave Minneapolis but stay in the suburbs. There are times last winter, Minneapolis-St. Paul did such a horrible job in cleaning the snow. I stayed out of Minneapolis for 3 months. And it really did not cut my pay that much. I was still, after all expenses, I could still do $19 to $20 an hour staying out of Minneapolis. And what helped a lot was I spent more time on Lyft because Lyft has as you know, the perimeter where you can do a perimeter. This perimeter doesn't have that. So I could use the perimeter. Let me give you a perfect example. I don't know if you can see this. So this was one night I did the perimeter around the Mall of America.
Yeah.
It was surging all around the Mall of America. People get off at work. People leave the mall at around 9:10. Constant surging. I did 7 rides, had 3 tips, did 2 hours and 45 minutes. I made $95.40 in 2 hours, 45 minutes doing 7 rides of a 5-mile perimeter.
Yeah. I mean, the area filter is something Lyft introduced a while ago, and I love that as well. But, my question to you was more like, I understand sick time. I understand this. Look, I've spoken to these companies. The companies say one thing that is very clear to me, which is they're kind of nervous that this starts the ball rolling, right? And this is going to end up in that all drivers are going to join a union, either SEIU or whoever they are. And they're worried that the only reason, Uber and Lyft sat down at the table in Seattle and New York City and not is that they got the promise from the driver community that they're going to stay independent contractors. I think they're worried about that really, really a lot more than to pay higher. I think they're willing to sit down and negotiate as long as the driver community or the unions give up the rights of unionization or collective bargaining and they admit to staying independent contractors. And that's the feeling I get from these companies, that once they have that part of, because they tell me clearly, they go, look, we cannot afford all these employees. We cannot have everybody as employees. Our business model is not set up for that. Do you think that's the sticking point here, that if the drivers were to accept, okay, we're going to stay independent contractors like they did in Seattle, and then Uber and Lyft comes to the table and sits down and figures out higher rates, maybe not 140 and 51, maybe it's something like you said, like Mayor Frey said, $120 and 40, somewhere in that range. What do you think? Is that the sticking point?
I don't know enough about the situation. You know a lot more than I do. I do know, Uber, Lyft, no doubt they're worried about, people banding together and have unions. But you know what? Every company in America, look at, like Starbucks and everybody, they're all anti-union. Me personally, I come from a family that was in the musicians union the whole life. So I'm I'm a benefit of the unions. I'm not a strong fan of a lot of unions sometimes in terms of what they try and push. So, I'm kind of like border the fence. I don't like all the unions and what they try and push, because I think they try and push for so much, but I'm a product of it. So, I can't complain about it.
Yeah. And we have a few more minutes. I mean, this is like fascinating to me that you are feeling the pinch of the upfront fares, that you're getting paid less on one hand, but on the other hand, you're kind of going like, okay, well, if I'm a driver, I have no income as opposed to some income, right? So, I mean, I really want you to tell our audience why you're opposing the city council, and be frank and be open about it. I mean, I think you have a valid point. Some, a lot of people are, look, there's 10 to 12,000 drivers according to the report in Minnesota, right? But bulk of it are in the Twin Cities or Minneapolis, right? You guys did 18 million trips in 2022. That's a lot of trips, right? And that's a lot of money went into the economy. But do you feel for the drivers who are truly doing this full time and not making ends meet, and they're still ending up on, government subsidies for food or for healthcare? I mean, do you see where the dilemma is here when it comes to full-time drivers?
Okay, so you want me to be blunt? I'm going to set off.
Absolutely blunt. There is no script. Okay. There is no muzzle. There is nothing here.
So again, I was at almost every TNC committee meeting. There were 3 drivers on that committee meeting. They were all MALTA drivers. I picked up Representative Sandra Feist one time at the airport, a Democrat, and we talked, and she wanted to know why I was against it. I said, I'm against it because all you're doing is listening to drivers who claim they can't make enough money who are full time. I don't believe it. So she said, well, send me your pay slip. So I sent her my packet. She's like, there's a whole different narrative out here. I'm going to recommend you be put on that council. I didn't get put on the council. 3 MALTA drivers did. I asked the commissioner, I go, well, how did these drivers get picked? She had said somebody in the governor's office did. And I think it was a total setup, because 3 MALTA drivers do not represent all of us. the Malta drivers are the loudest drivers out there, and a majority, I don't want to say a majority, but many of them are airport drivers. I had a reporter drive with me for 4 hours with the Minnesota Reformer. We went to the airport lot. He couldn't believe how there was 70 drivers sitting there. He said, what are these drivers doing? I go, they're sitting waiting for their one running hour. So we get there and interview some of them. One of them shows them his phone, 12% acceptance rate. Yeah, you're not making any money if you're sitting at the airport and you're doing a 12% acceptance rate. There's other drivers now that the media is talking to that says these drivers are not making any money because of 3 reasons. They're either too lazy to do the job, they don't know how to do the job, or they're just, I'll be honest, they're just stupid. On the committee meeting, there was one woman there. She started crying during the committee meeting about how she can't make enough money, okay? She was crying, and then she was accusing the Uber Lyft representatives of having a shill who's trying to fix things and trying to mess things up. They were saying I was the shill. Okay. I wasn't a shill. I told the Uber reps, Freddie and Brent. You do things that I'm not happy about, but I'm against these Malta drivers because they're making claims that I don't believe are true. The next week, that same driver who was crying and saying she couldn't make enough money, she was telling the Uber and Lyft representatives, I'm a diamond driver, and what are you going to do to keep passengers from hurting my rating? And they said, well, what do you mean? She goes, I do, and this is specifically what she said in the meeting. I do airport runs. I take people to the airport, or I pick people at the airport. And what do I do? Because they're going to hurt my rating when I refuse to lift up their luggage and help with their luggage. She goes, I don't like it when passengers expect me to help me with their have me help them with their luggage. And she's saying, what are you going to do to help my rating when they give me a bad rating because I don't want help with their luggage? And she wonders why she's not making money. Yeah. Airport runs give you the best tips, the most consistent tips. But if you don't want to sit and help, if you want to sit in your car and just wait for somebody to put their luggage in their trunk, guess what? You're not getting a good tip. You're not getting a good rating. That's your own fault. Okay.
I mean, that's one specific driver, but I think driver pay overall has gone down. We're all admitting this as drivers, like Uber, don't like Uber, whatever it is, right? And personally speaking, like you're blunt, I'm being blunt. Doing rideshare with all the risks that are involved in doing rideshare. Obviously, look, if you do rideshare, you're going to drive 5,000-6,000 miles a month if you're a full-time driver. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when you're going to get into a crash. I mean, it's the deal, right? And to me, what do you think? What do you think a rideshare driver should get paid after expenses? Obviously, everybody's expenses are different. This may be tough for you to answer, but in your own personal case, should it be 50%, let's say, more than minimum wage, existing minimum wage in Minneapolis, which let's say right now is at 15.5 range? Should it be 22 after expenses? Should it be 25? Is driver expectations are too high? I mean, as far as what they should make.
Again, if I can make $23 an hour after expenses, I'm happy because I like the job. I can do what I want. I travel a lot.
Okay.
So, and the price proposal.
Okay, so your expenses maybe, $5-6 an hour. So if you're making 28, 29 online hours and take your expenses out, you're 50% above minimum wage, then you're happy with it. I got it. Well, we have a few minutes remaining. I mean, look, this is your chance. Give Minneapolis drivers, and look, there is other, by the way, legislation in different cities coming around. There is Chicago, there's Boston, there's Portland now. There is this movement. Do you think this movement is unjustified in all these cities with legislators? Because I mean, truly, all the drivers are complaining about not making enough money, and you're saying it's not true. So, what do you think about that?
I think we definitely need, because of that 25% cut, we definitely need to be pushing for more money. But these drivers are claiming they're making $5, $6, $8 an hour and they're making poverty wages. Again, if they are, it's their own fault. Yeah. It's that simple, okay. Because I know what I make, and the city council, basically, when I asked them, how am I making this money? And they would say, well, you're different. I didn't get into it, but yeah, I'm different because I work hard. I work smart. I read your blogs, which help me improve my income. There's no doubt about it. I don't or I don't sit with a 12% acceptance rate. But I'm also not taking every ride. I've met drivers that take every ride, and I beg them to stop doing that.
Yeah, I agree. But so, I appreciate you doing this. Look, it takes a lot of courage to come forward and talk about this, because it seems like everybody is saying, buy Uber, buy Lyft. I'm like, yeah, but you guys will have no income whatsoever. And then I think about it, if they don't come back and there is no replacement at that scale, which I'm sure it's not going to be, all these drivers are going to fall into state, funded programs, right? I mean, they may already be in one with food stamps and with healthcare and everything else. What is the backup plan here? Like what? I mean, I'm sure these drivers who want Uber and Lyft to leave don't have the bank account to withstand them gone for like 6 months, 8 months, right? I mean, they got to do something, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. So, final word to you. Give us like 1 minute of advice to our audience.
Well, my thing is, if you're not making enough money doing this job and you're making poverty wages, quit. There are so many jobs in this city. You can go work for a convenience store and make $19 an hour with full benefits and profit sharing at Quick Trip. Work Quick Trip. I took people to interviews at warehouse jobs for Pepsi and Coke. They were paying $24 an hour with full benefits. I don't want to do that job because it is a lot of work. But if you can't make enough money, I don't understand why you're continuing to do this job. Quit and do a job that takes more work but pays a lot better.
Yep. And here's Loren from Minneapolis, from the hotbed of this discussion. And, I appreciate it. I appreciate your honesty. I appreciate your candor. And we listen to all sides. And I think you represented your side clearly, really well. So, again, thank you. Stay healthy. Be safe out there when you're driving. And we will definitely keep in touch. This is not over yet. The game, I think, has just begun.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for watching this episode of Behind the Wheel on the RideShare Guy. We've been doing these interviews for the past 6 months with very successful drivers from different cities around the nation. Click here for another episode. Make sure you subscribe and turn on all notifications for other episodes of Behind the Wheel, as well as amazing content on our channel.